for us, I think in general, it's a topic which in the US you are looking at ombuds and you know a lot about that, but a lot of countries haven't really implemented ombuds. So they will get to know a little bit about what you do, and also the other aspect of how the ombudsman, you say ombuds, but countries are still using the ombudsman. So that how that is functioning, maybe we can touch on that if required. So Stacey's here now, so we'll get her in and let's thank her, and then let's move into introducing the conference first. But that I think is also important to tell people what it is all about, because there was a session on neurodiversity and mediation. So hi Stacey.
Hi.
We were wondering whether you got the time right or got it wrong. We were wondering, but people have realized that you have to come right on time for my shows. Okay, Amanda's here.
Am I wrong? Did it not start at 7:30?
Yeah, perfect. It just started now.
Good.
It was so.
Perfect.
Amanda's also here. Hi, Amanda. Anyone else joining us? This is it. That's the panel. Okay, Jared is here. Jared is here. So let's just
Jared,
get
and then maybe Harshenia.
How precise and how exact can people be on time? I'm amazed. It's like so I'll let them get in, then I'll just want to introduce the conference and I'll move from there. So of course you people will have to tell us about yourself. That will also happen. So hi Jared.
Hi everyone.
Because I didn't get a mail back from you. I sent you a mail about the conference. I didn't get a mail. I didn't know whether you were coming in or not, but thank you for coming in.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so perfect. So thank you, Bina, Daniela, Stacy, Amanda, Jared for doing this, and Nanchang, Isaac for the last session. So thank you very much. Before you people tell us about yourself, just give me 2 minutes to talk about the conference, only because I told you, I was just telling them that I had a session on neurodiversity and mediation, and there was Martha, she's autistic, and I was asking her in terms of preparation for things. She said, look, we want to know what's happening here. Because if you've seen earlier sessions, earlier conferences and all, it's a symposium that I've done, I just start immediately. Don't waste time on anything, let's go. But I thought maybe it'll take a minute. Of course, I would have preferred someone else to talk about it, but I'll talk about it. The World Mediators Conference, idea being, let's put out a vision for 2026 for the evolution of mediators and mediation. And then over the year, up to the next one next year, we'll just maybe have more elaborate discussions on it. So this is more of just a thought, because definitely in that whatever time we have, we won't be able to discuss the entire aspect of ombuds and mediators, but at least a thought process. So inaugural address by Ken Cloke on 18th May, which was also his birthday, which I am celebrating as World Mediators Day. So all sessions are available on YouTube. You can have a look at them there, and you can search Mediator Vikram. You'll find the YouTube channel. My job done. Thank you very much. So Stacey, thank you for suggesting the topic. Please tell us about yourself, and then everyone can introduce themselves. Yes, Stacey.
Yes, good morning. My name is Stacey Rouse. I am an aspiring ombuds. I have my master's in dispute resolution and learned of it through there and took a course. And I'm currently working as director of operations at a company called Dynamic Team Solutions. And I'm just so excited to share with the rest of the mediation world.
Great, thank you very much. So Bina, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Bina Patel, and I'm a senior associate ombudsman at the U.S. Patent and Trademark. And I've been practicing this field for some time. Thank you.
Perfect. So Daniela, look, in the order of the way you people came into the meeting, except Stacey obviously suggested the topic, she had to go first. So Daniela, please.
Hi, I'm Daniela Brancaforte. I'm very happy to be here. As you see, I have Georgetown University in the background, although I'm not there right now. I'm actually in New Orleans in the United States. And I have been at Georgetown for 8 years, practicing as an ombuds for 1 year. And I'm actually a cultural anthropologist. That's what I have my PhD in. And so this is, the ombuds world is a new world, and I do see a lot of overlap and similarities in kind of my training and background. So yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you for coming in. Yes, Amanda, please.
Good morning, everyone, or evening, or I don't know, middle of the night, probably. My name is Amanda Dean. I am the Ombuds for faculty and staff at Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. I have been a professional ombuds for just over 5 years. And I'm also on the board of the International Ombuds Association, as well as having my hands in a lot of other ombudsy things. So that's me.
Perfect. So Jared, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jared Lee. I had studied dispute resolution at Pepperdine University and had a background of mediation, working for courts in LA and as well as in Honolulu before coming to the ombuds field. And so now I've been doing that for a little while and currently one of the ombudsmen for University of California, Irvine.
Great. Now, Chenya, I don't know, get the pronunciation. Stacey, how do you pronounce her name? She's also in, so maybe she can introduce herself and then we can move. Yes.
Perfect.
Great. She's just connecting her audio. Look, I'm just going to say hi to you because I was not being able to pronounce your name correctly. So, Chenya, is that okay?
It's Hershenia. Good morning.
Hi, Hershenia. Everyone has introduced themselves, so please, if you could also just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just move. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I am an aspiring ombud, so I have my dispute resolution certificate from Pepperdine University. I am a member of IOA as well as EON, and I am glad to be here. I'm also a mediator, civil mediator.
Only thing is that we will not be able to understand those acronyms. You'll have to also help us on that because you're with people who don't know anything about it, because ombuds is not a concept that is something which is happening everywhere. So you're going to take us right from the basics. It's like no one knows anything. We'll start from there. So we can understand what IOA is, but we won't guess. You can tell us about it. So you want to tell us what IOA is?
IOA is the International Ombuds Association, and EON is the Emerging Ombuds Network.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, Stacey, of course, you have to start and set the ball rolling, please.
That's great. So we would like to move to a definition of ombuds. And Daniela, do you mind starting with that? And everyone on the panel, we're just going to make this conversational. So as Daniela starts things, then we can all hop in and share and flesh out that definition as we want.
Yeah, sure. And yes, please jump in. So as Vikram mentioned, we use the term ombudsman, ombudsperson, ombud, and ombuds. Basically, ombuds is a Swedish word that means representative. And I always like to say that because I primarily work with students at Georgetown, so undergraduate and graduate students. And the first question is always, what is an ombuds? So I have that definition ready for them. And then the next thing I will say to people who visit my office is that an ombuds is really someone who is a designated neutral, who is there to solve conflicts, to try to resolve conflicts and concerns that individuals or groups may have. And the next thing I say is that at my institution, especially, we're trying to really strive for a more just, inclusive, and engaged organization. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what an ombuds does. The other thing is that there are 3 different types of ombuds. So we are all organizational ombuds, but there are also classical ombuds and advocate ombuds. And I'm not going to go into those definitions, but really for, someone else can if they want, but really we are organizational ombuds. And yeah, so I think that's about all I want to say. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I missed. We do, the organizational ombuds are we all practice with the same standards of practice, and there are 4 standards of practice that I'll mention. The first one being confidentiality. So if any visitor comes to our office, we are a confidential resource. I always say, unless there is imminent harm to the visitor or to someone else, or there's a threat of harm, but otherwise we do not share anything with anyone else outside the office unless we're asked to do so by the visitor explicitly. We're also independent from other organizational structures in the organization. So independence is the second one, confidentiality, independence. The other one is impartiality. So as I said, we are designated neutrals. And we also say oftentimes that we're multi-partial. So we kind of try to see all perspectives and all kinds of sides to the narratives that come to us and our from our visitors. And the fourth is really the idea of informality. So I work at a university. I tell my visitors that if someone comes to my office and wants to file formal grievances, we are not a formal grievance office. So we do not put anyone on notice. And so that's really the fourth issue, is that we don't keep records. We don't follow any formal process, but we can help people if they're interested in filing formal grievances to understand those processes. So to sum up, my summary is designated neutral, we're trusted navigators, and really trying to establish and form more just, engaged, and inclusive organizations. And now I will turn to my colleagues. If I said anything incorrectly, please jump in now.
Daniela, what am I going to do? If you're going to let everyone come in, then whatever. But I'm not. I'll just move away. Everything will come to me, and then I will send it out. But because
Vikram, it's over to you, please.
Yes, that's the thing. No, the only thing is that you use the word neutral. That is, of course, a debatable word in the mediation world. So maybe I'll just keep that aside for the moment. We won't get into that discussion. But Amanda wanted to come in. So please, Amanda.
Well, I just wanted to comment that there are those other types of ombuds, and we're really talking about organizational ombuds. Advocate ombuds obviously are not meant to be neutral. They're meant to be advocates. Classical ombuds can act as arbitrators, so they do make decisions. So there are differences in those, but those core values are really for organizational ombuds. So
perfect. But at this stage, yeah, we'll just get Aaron in also. Hi, Aaron. Aaron, you want to introduce yourself? Although coming late, there is punishment for that, but today we won't send you outside the class.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Footman. I'm an ombuds at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I apologize for my tardiness. I had another meeting at the same time. Okay, Thank you for the opportunity to sit into the meeting and learn about the program.
But you will also have to jump in whenever required. So please, you're not just a spectator, you are going to participate, because spectators, Absolutely. Look, we don't need spectators. We have the YouTube channel is live right now everywhere. Spectators have enough options. We don't want you to get involved. All your thoughts don't hold anything back. Please talk about it, because why I'm saying don't hold anything back is because there is a structure of the ombuds that you people are used to. But what are the issues that have come up with your practice, and has it really taken off? What the situation is? Because today I see that the world hasn't really taken to it. So if you are going to take it out into the world, if other people, because there is a issue here where we have, because the ombudsman that we have here is actually a person who tries to help them settle, but then passes an order. So becomes an arbitrator. And if that is the word we are sending out, it's a big issue, because then you are totally confusing people. What you are saying is totally different from what is being practiced here as an ombudsman. So it's important to get that distinguishing thing also happen. So now the only thing is that I don't know who wants to come in, but Bina, you want to come in or?
Yeah, sure. Welcome, Aaron. I'm so glad you're here. So Aaron and I are colleagues, just so everybody knows. Yeah. I think it's interesting just to see, Vikram, that they serve as an arbitrator. I guess it just depends on the type of ombudsing they're doing. As Amanda mentioned, there's different types of ombuds. And so if arbitration does fall into place, it doesn't go with what we do as organizational ombuds. And we are internally facing, meaning we work with the employees of the organization and not customers of the organization, which is an external organizational ombuds, right? So there's a little nuance in that too. But part of the work we do is our job is to look at systemic issues, recommend systemic reviews, which is really a pulse of the environment we're taking. We highlight trends, we report out on trends. It's a proactive approach. It's also a defensive approach. It's just how the situations and the issues come into it. And also, and the recommendations we provide to help improve the environment or what we're trying to get at. And Aaron, please, I invite you to speak in on this too, because we've had several we've done where we're at. But the goal is to really help improve the morale and set things right as much as we can within our capacity. Yeah.
Perfect. So Jared, you want to just tell us a little bit about, I mean, whatever's been discussed, obviously you agree with them, I'm sure, but the disagreement part of it, if there's anything that you want to point out.
Nothing I disagree with, but I would also add that among also those goals are being advocates for a fair process and also informed decision making. And so, as was mentioned, for the organizational ombuds, you won't be a decision maker, but you do end up doing a lot of coaching, could be making recommendations to either an individual or an organization. And the choice is oftentimes ultimately left up to them, but a lot of the skills that you might use in mediation or other dispute resolution often come into play as an ombuds. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much, is that you get to use all sorts of skills of mediation, facilitation, coaching, and beyond to do the best that you can do in your job.
Because Harshania is going to come in after that. We are going to talk about whether ombuds are mediators or not, because that is that was a starting point on the topic. We don't have to stick to topics. We're open to talk about other things, but that aspect was something that we need to discuss. Are there mediators or not? So Harshania, do you want to, because obviously you have new thoughts on it. You're an emerging one. So is there some new thoughts that you have?
Yeah, so I'm aspiring. I haven't practiced as an ombuds, but I definitely still have those skill sets, as Jared mentioned, from prior capacities in corporations. The first thing that really made me want to go into ombuds is because I know that as a mediator, you can kind of use those same skills. There's a difference. The only thing for me is that if I were going to be an ombuds and work as an ombuds in an organization, I definitely wouldn't want to do the mediation for them as well, from employer to employee, because there's confidential information that gets shared when visitors come into the office and they're talking to you about their concerns. So you don't want to feel as though you're not being neutral or there's some level of bias there. If there is not, there are people that are ombuds and also mediators, of course, but those skills are transferable, and it's just a great another resource to have under your belt as a dispute resolution professional.
Perfect. So there is, so you're basically talking about the skill and not the process. So you're not doing the process, but you bring in what you would bring in as a mediator. So that's something
Yes.
like what you have. Perfect. So Amanda, yeah, you were saying something.
A lot of organizational ombuds stay away from the word mediator or mediation. We're sort of jumping ahead. I understand we're just jumping into the mediation piece, but or are specific in saying like little m mediation or facilitated conversation, because there are those formalized pieces within the idea of mediation, right? Like many of us are state certified or credentialed mediators. We do that in our qualifications or I did it in graduate school. But in the ombuds work, I stay away from saying that I mediate and say that I offer to help facilitate conversation. My organization has mediators. So if you're going through a formalized process, which I don't do, as Daniela talked about, they can ask for mediation as part of that formal process. And then there are other people who are certified mediators within the organization who go in and do formal mediation. But what I would do is more, feels like mediation, but it's really facilitated conversation.
Because I think Daniela wants to come in, but before that, Daniela, I'm just taking from where Harshanya said what she was saying. So if you are party to certain confidential information as part of the facilitative process, is there an issue of you being a mediator in that situation? Whoever wants to come in, Daniela, you want to come in, please? Daniela, yes? Is there something?
Oh, I didn't raise my hand, but
Okay.
Aaron, were you going to come in? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
You waved your hand. Look, the thing is, even if your hand moves in front of the camera, it means you wanted to come in. You can't even touch your nose now. It means it's a sign. It's a sign.
All right, for punting it over to me. It's so interesting. I think because we stay impartial and neutral, and we understand that the information that we receive is not our information, but the information belongs to the person who brings the information. So for us, it's easy to stay neutral and impartial. So no matter what information is shared with us, that is theirs. And even if we know some information that could be incriminating, we don't share that information unless we get permission to share that information. And that's from both sides, that we facilitate, as I think Amanda said, that we facilitate conversations. So when you're facilitating conversation, there's information that you have access to, but you don't have a right to share it.
But isn't that the same with isn't that the same in a mediation process?
It's similar. But mediation is more of a formal process. We're informal as ombuds.
I mean, this is part of what we are going to be discussing, and the idea is that. And Bina, this movement of the hand means that you want to come in. Okay, yeah, please.
Yeah, to sort of add to what Amanda and Aaron are talking about, in mediation, because I started my career as a mediator, as a family mediator, but they're like formal processes, right? You've got an agreement that you draft up and both parties have to sign, or all parties, you come up with schedules and whose transfer of assets. Divorce mediations are notorious for that. So you're asking for all this additional paperwork, whereas with the ombuds, we don't do that. There is no formal agreement. It's more about, can we find a way to sort of settle our differences, and what do next steps look like? It's all verbal. We ourselves as ombuds also don't keep records. So, and that may vary with every organization of record keeping, but for the most part, we do not keep records, in fact. So that level of formality is gone. That layer in itself is gone. But also, we're not always looking for fact finding, as Aaron said. We're looking to see what are the gray area issues that we can sort of settle with these facilitated discussions, so that we can just have folks compromise at the end of the day, like come to an agreement. I wouldn't even call it a win-win, but it's more about, let's settle our differences and then move forward with it. Just ultimately building and sustaining long-term relationships. Yeah.
We'll come to that confidentiality part of it, but Harshanya had raised her hand. Harshanya, you raised your hand, then we'll come to Daniela.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So I was going to actually comment on the same thing that Bina commented on. I think that also for people who are mediators and not ombuds, it's just easier when you're coming in, when you're just hearing both party sides at the same time. So you have one party that's standing firm on their position and have their demand, and then you have the other party that's standing firm on their position. If you're, as Amanda mentioned, more facilitating, which mediators do facilitate the conversation. But when you're an ombuds and you're switching into mediation mode, it's just as Aaron stated, you have confidential information already. But to a degree, for some people, they don't want the other person to feel as though that they're taking sides, because they do have confidential information from that person or that visitor's concern before they go into mediation. So you don't want the other party to feel like there is some level of advocacy there.
Okay, so this confidential part, I will have a look at that. But Daniela, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to also add that the media, and I would love to sort of talk about what the definition of mediation from, your Vikram's, position and from the ombuds position, so we can maybe have that dialogue. But what I was going to add is that ombuds offices are also completely voluntary. So unlike any kind of mediation that sometimes is mandatory, there is nothing mandatory about going to the ombuds office. And so all the parties who are coming to what I call an informal mediation, what Amanda called a facilitated conversation or discussion, we use different terms, but really the informality is there, and the facilitation is there. And the goal is to really figure out how to get people to communicate together again and to figure out what the next steps are. And either party can walk away when they want to. That's the other step, voluntary. So there is no kind of forced agreement or mandated agreement at the end. I just wanted to add that.
I tell you, Daniela, the issue is this whole aspect of mandatory mediation that has gone around through the court system has taken mediation into a direction which it should not have. Mediation was supposed to be voluntary. It's supposed to be informal. It had nothing to do with the court system. And you don't start me off on that because my ranting will start, and don't make me do that because I keep doing that. I've done so much on that. We have sessions on that. Mediation in the court system. We have sessions on mandatory mediation coming up. So I won't get into that part. So for me, mediation, like you said, what does mediation mean to me? The thing is that today the advantage is, look, for even in the US, in the court system, you have a definition of mediation and conciliation under those laws. I'm not even concerned with those because the court system by itself and mediation is not to be connected. So we'll leave that out. Outside the court system, there is no definition. And you are a signatory to the Singapore Convention, like India is, and a lot of other countries are. So what I've been telling people is, let's just go straight to the definition in the Singapore Convention. Let's not go anywhere else because such a nice definition here covers everything. So have a look at it. I mean, this is where you're looking at. If you want me to read it out, in a very broad manner, a process irrespective of the expression used. So conciliation, mediation, Bina process, Daniela process, whatever name. You don't give it whatever name you want to give it. Or on the basis upon which the process is carried out, facilitative, evaluative, narrative, transformative, doesn't matter. Basic thing is whereby parties attempt to reach an amicable settlement of the dispute with the assistance of a third person or persons. Important, lacking the authority to impose a solution upon the parties to the dispute. This is the key part of it. Everything else is something that we've just made out to confuse people. All the names that we just had a session before this on mediation and conciliation, this whole difference. And of course, the models part of it, we have another discussion coming up on that. So let's not confuse the user. So I'm keeping it as simple as this. And this is backed by law, because if you have to interpret a statute, if you don't have a definition in your statute, you can go to a UN convention which the country has signed. So in terms of interpretation of statutes, also there's no issue there. So I'm looking at from this perspective. If there's anyone else who wants to, of course, Stacey wants to come in. If there's anyone who disagrees with this aspect, then we'll have to maybe take it somewhere else. Not the discussion. You won't take the discussion somewhere else. But Stacey, what do you say?
I was just coming in to ask you to do what you just did. So that's perfect. And I think having that working definition from the Singapore Convention is helpful. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add in that, but I thought if anyone does, let's do that now. And if not, Vikram, if you don't mind, we thought we could share a little bit about comparatively how Ombuds looks like between hours and also that mediation piece. And I think one thing I've heard you talk about over and over is mediation is a mindset. And I definitely think that mindset, I mean, it's not only a mindset, but there is a mediator's mindset. And I feel like Ombuds really has a lot of that. A lot of people who come into it have that. So jumping off of that, but then sharing a little bit of our stories and comparatively what we use as we do our position. But I didn't want to cut anyone off if anyone had anything else to say about a definition of mediation with Ombuds.
Anyone disagrees with this, the definition? Are we going to pick up some other definition, whatever? I mean, if this, okay, everyone agrees to this. But Stacey, the confidentiality part of it, I just wanted to just pick that up, because how is confidentiality protected? Because you talk about confidentiality, how is it protected? Who, I mean,
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think for all of us, the name Chuck Howard is going to pop into our head because he's been the one to do a lot of work for establishing that for office. He's not the only one, but so part of the way confidentiality gets established is in the charters that every ombuds office has that specifically addresses different parts of the role, and confidentiality is a piece of that. I do think some of the confidentiality, it appears to me, and how I've listened to practices and things that I've read, is it also comes into every visit, you lay out what the ombuds is and isn't and what it does. So Daniela, when she was talking about the first questions she has from all of her visitors, she doesn't just go off of questions. She also has something she tells them when they come in about work for the ombuds. I'm gonna now punt to everyone else for let them talk about what they specifically do to establish this. This is huge, Vikram, so we could spend several times talking about all that. So I think a lot will come up about how confidentiality gets established, but I'm gonna pass to who next wants to talk
that
about
passing
it.
always comes to me. The peace pipe comes to me.
Okay,
and
I'm
then I
passing
pass
to you,
it to
Vikram.
others. But I tell you where I'm coming from, because in terms of mediation also, people have been in the US have been saying it's a confidential process, and we have a mediator who's gone around the country saying your mediation is not confidential. He calls it the confidentiality tour because of the fact that whatever is said in the mediation, whatever happens in the mediation, courts can ask for that information. So it is it is also, again, whether some states protect that or not. So I'm just trying to understand the similar situation is what is going to be in case of the ombuds also. Is that correct? Or
Yeah,
I have
see
two heads nodding.
Amanda
Yeah, Amanda and Jared
going,
have
but
nodded.
I would say that's a key difference between ombuds and mediators. So Amanda.
We don't have a legal protection to confidentiality. So unlike lawyers, doctors, right? There's no legal privilege in what ombuds do, which is why many of us have charters or, office. We have some sort of agreement because we're serving internal constituents. We have an agreement within the organization that we are serving around that confidentiality. And then specifically in conversation, right? I think one of the things that's really stands out to me is I always say that I am confidential, right? I don't share information. The thing about mediation, conversation, group work, there's many people in the room. I can't stop them from going and talking about what happened, right? So confidentiality, I am confidential. I will not share information, right? We are also trained in, if you take the foundational course through IOA, however you sort of get your ombuds training in office through IOA, whatever, my experience, we're trained very rigorously in our not keeping documentation. So that's a piece of that. What I think Bina said earlier, mediators come with an agreement, right? In my mediation training, you are trained on how you come to an agreement, even if it's not distributive, right? Even if it's not about assets, you would still have some sort of formalized agreement between parties. We don't do that. If they want to create that, they can do that on their own. They don't do that with me. And I'm not a house to host that information. Even if they want to write it up while we're talking, right? Then they keep that and they have to hold each other accountable to it. So that's, I don't keep case notes, beyond sort of the case itself happening. Everything I write is case coded, right? There's not names or identifying things on, so we're trained to keep confidentiality as we go.
But I'll tell you why I'm trying to put this across is because obviously we're discussing it and people, of course, various parts of the world will pick up from there. What I'm trying to put across is that in the US also, it depends on the state. And if you are telling a party that it is confidential, but actually it is not, because the court can ask for that information, because this tour that this mediator is going around saying is that is actually malpractice. If you tell in a mediation also, you tell them that it's confidential, it's malpractice because it can be called in. because there was some matter there. There was a mediation in which a PowerPoint presentation was put out, and then this matter went to court, and the court asked for that PowerPoint presentation. There was resistance, obviously, but it did not work. So courts can ask for that. I'm just saying that let's just get that aspect out there, and if it doesn't differentiate from mediation or anything else, confidentiality by law is not protected. So I'm just putting that. Bina, yeah, Bina.
I have a follow-up to your question, actually. Is that in India where the courts can they request that?
In the US. It's the US.
Oh, US.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
India, we have a very good law on mediation. The best law on mediation, as I said, is called conciliation, which we had that discussion. I won't get into it. There's confidentiality is protected by law, and we have one law for the entire country. Of course, there's different states having to whether they adopt the uniform law, mediation law or not. Here we have one law. It's protected by a law, so we have that advantage here. So a lot of countries don't have that. Yeah, Manda.
And I think that's why a lot of ombuds stay away from the word mediation, because it has a weight and a meaning legally. There are a lot of ombuds who were former lawyers, for good or bad. And so that is a piece of the mindset, is to not to stay away from those words that have other meanings, which also, just to go back a little, we were talking about ombudsmen and ombuds, and while we are an international profession and an international organization, we are very North American centric in the sense of where this profession lives. And so there are members of IOA from all over the world, but of the 1,000+ members, 800 of them are in the US. So just to give some context.
So we want to change that. We want to change that. That's why this discussion, we want to change it. But I'm saying that, when I'm looking at it from, say, the Indian perspective, and we have a law which covers mediation. And if it's better off to protect confidentiality to cover under that, maybe it's perfectly all right. I mean, I'm saying to pick up something from the US, which in certain aspects, if you can tweak it in the way it's practiced, I have no problem with that. I mean, the concept, I think what we have to do is really actually the concept as to what we are doing. So what we are I don't know if Daniel and Jared if they had something to say, is there anything? Otherwise, what I wanted to do was each one of you could just pick up some example, any example of something that would come to you and how you would go about it. So we'll be able to understand what we're really talking about. And Stacey will be the one who'll start. Yes, Stacey. Any example?
Yes. So as an aspiring ombuds, I don't have a personal example of. So I'm gonna send it to somebody who's practicing so they can share it. I have times where in my roles in a university, I would have said this is a perfect ombuds opportunity, but that is different. So,
but Stacey, tell me something. There's that concept of playing hot potato or something. Is that what you're doing? Everything that comes to you, she throws it off fast. How fast does she do?
So, okay, I'm sorry. That is coming out of trying to be honest about what my experience is.
No, don't worry. Not putting in a spot there. So Jared has an example to give us. Yes, Jared.
Sure, and I also had a little bit to say on confidentiality beforehand, but also incorporate an example into it. I think because Ombuds is not specifically listed legally as something that could be protected from the courts, and I know, as you mentioned, even that for a mediator is sometimes questionable about how information can be prevented from going up into the courts. And at the end of the day, a lot of times that's up to, perhaps the judge that's there, whether that information is admissible. And for the ombuds that doesn't even have that, a lot of what it comes down to is discouraging people from taking ombuds and to subpoena them or to bring them into the courts to bring information in the first place, as all in addition, if they are called in, to prevent them from sharing any information at all, which I think Amanda got into a little bit with talking about not keeping any records. And so in doing so, you were able to build a practice to be able to tell people that, hey, we don't have any information to give. Even if you do call us into court, there is nothing that you will be able to find. And even if you do, it's all from memory. And I think one example that I can incorporate in is that I believe one time, one of the members in our office, when they do get a request for information because of some sort of legal proceeding, they're able to go through a list that pretty much gives them, that tells people that, hey, you know, we had mentioned at the forefront that we are not involved in these formal processes. Even if we are compelled to do so, we do not have any information to give. And any information we do have to give may come from memory if we're asked to stand up in court, and that may or may not be favorable against that attorney's client. And in many times, because of our strong practices that we hold and that expectation, sometimes that is enough to deter that information from coming into court. And that has happened a couple of times.
Perfect. So now who's going to start with the example? Now we're just trying to understand, for someone who doesn't know what the process is about, some example, a representative example of what you would largely be doing. So anyone, I think, whoever. Bina, you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I can give you many examples. I've done ombudsing in the private sector, but also nonprofit and the federal government. I'll start with federal. It just depends. Like, you know, we work for an entity at the end of the day, and there's certain statutory requirements at the federal level that we're supposed to report out on. And so an example would be where we wouldn't keep confidentiality, would be like in the defense world, where a whistleblower, a potential whistleblower, we had to report that out only because of classified information that could be leaked. So that's something that I had to include in my charter. And I would let people know up front, like, if this is the case, then I will go with you to go get it reported to the attorneys or legal counsel, so that the handoff wouldn't be so isolated or so black and white, I guess, but also to make sure that what we needed to do to cover, you know, the laws that we have are done. The other thing is, so it just varies, I would say, how we're doing it because of the obligations we have at the federal level. The other thing I would say is an example of, so that's one example. Another example I would say on a regular day where we don't have that kind of stuff would be, you know, being, I'm having issues with my manager. Can you help me understand what's going on? And am I being, you know, why are they mistreating me? So those gray area issues of confusion of what could be potentially bullying or abuse of power, things like that, is something they would come to us about, and then we would try and maybe facilitate a discussion or do some shuttle diplomacy to help mitigate those issues. But at the same time, I believe, and please, all of you, I ask you to also share your opinions, is to help them rationalize the conflict, because there may be no conflict there, and they feel as though there is. But it's really an inner battle that they have. And while we're not psychologists or in that kind of a field, it's also, I think, our job to help them understand and unpack that conflict from the emotional perspective before they decide to go formal, which is something they always have an option to do. So
Okay,
I hope that helps.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, just Stacey, one sec. What we're going to be doing is, let's start from the basics. Now,
Okay.
in the organization, how is that communication put out? Who is this person? How is that person explained to the people in the organization? So let's start with that after Stacey tells us what she was telling us. Yes, Stacey, what were you saying?
Oh, I just appreciate what Bina was saying, and that Ombuds becomes a place where a person can come in to explore, you know, the discomfort that they're feeling, or insert emotion there, whatever it is they're feeling that brought them there, to have a place to air grievances, look at it, and get some perspective and reality testing, and also to test out where it could go from there before anything sets in motion. And I think that is one of the true values of the organizational ombuds, is because sometimes if people think the only place they can go, it might get out and it might start something they're not intending to start, they will never even bring it up. And that causes a lot of troubles within the organization and for that person. So that was just what I was going to say before we started.
Okay, so Aaron wants to say something. Yes, Aaron.
Thank you, Vikram.
So
So
everything goes through me, you know that.
absolutely. One of the things that we focus on is not just the information that the person they give us is confidential, but also the person themselves. One of the things, like for us in our office, is that when we interact with someone, we ask them, how would you like for us to communicate with you? Do you want us to contact you through a personal phone, like through your cell phone or through a landline? And when we do converse with these people, we'll also ask the question, how would you like us to send out the invitation or the calendar invite? Like for us, we don't put any identifying information in the calendar invite. So we don't put John Doe in it or anything else like that, because we want to make sure that that person is kept confidential, because they may have an issue with their supervisor. Another thing that we do is that our office space, we are in a secluded place. So when people come visit us, no one knows that they're coming to visit us. We're off the grid. So they're not going to run into a coworker or things of that nature. So we want to make sure that their presence is kept confidential. And even in our inner working, we converse with each other in the office to schedule people so that people don't run into each other, because people know that people are in conflict with each other. So they know that if they're in the ombuds office, they're venting the concern. So we're very mindful of that as well.
But
So not just the information, but the people.
you have to clarify that you're not in the basement where the heating is. You're still in an
Well,
all right
enough,
place.
we are
Oh
in
my
the
God.
dungeon.
I picked up the wrong. I
We
touched the
are
wrong
in the
nerve.
dungeon, right? Okay. We used to be in the penthouse, but now we're in the dungeon, but it's okay.
Okay, so where we're starting from is the first thing is the communication within the organization of who the ombuds is, and the aspect that it is not in the hierarchy of the organization in relation to the HR and all that. So Amanda is going to come in. So please, Amanda.
Yeah, so I think so Daniela and I are in unique positions here also because we're in new roles. So I started this office here at the community college 3 years ago. And so a lot of offices are established and so have sort of reputation within an organization. And so it's less about advertising what the Ombuds does and more about reminding and outreaching that they're there as a resource. But for new employees, new students, new faculty members, and new offices, there is a lot of that messaging that has to go out. And so for me, right, I don't have any handy, but I have like a physical pamphlet, a little trifold brochure that talks about what the Ombuds office does, highlights those pieces of confidential, neutral, impartial, informal, and independent. Thank you. And I went on tour, right? When I started, I sort of went to different offices, to different employee groups, and talked about my role. And part of it was to say, if you don't trust the organization, I hope that you will trust me, because there was a lot of those questions of confidentiality, right? How do we know? And I said, well, it's part of my job. And I want you to know that I take it very seriously. And if this organization ever threatens that, then I'm out, right? I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to stay at a place that wants to, question. They created this office. They hired me to do the job. If they start to push on that, I don't want to be here. And so there is sort of a personal marketing piece that comes out where the ombuds have to be advocates for the ombuds. But then there's also just the sort of generalized marketing. For a lot of us, I think it's talked about in new employee orientation, right? There's a piece about the ombuds or a slide or a flyer or something that goes out. I'm also, when I meet with groups, because I like in the fall, when school starts back, I will go to a lot of departmental meetings and remind people that I exist and say hello. And I forgot the piece I was going to say in that. But there's sort of just this personal piece of, I tell people you don't have to have a problem to come talk to me. If you just want to understand the office more, you can call, right? You don't need to call me because something's going on. And I've had people call and say, I don't really have an issue. I don't know what the issue is. Can we just talk for a minute? I go, sure, of course, it's my job. So there is that communication piece comes sort of higher up. And I think it also relies on each ombuds to be clear of why we sit where we sit. So who do you report to? What office are you in? Why is your office in the basement? Why do you report like to the executive vice president instead of the president or the board, right? You have to know all those things. You can answer those questions.
Well, that's what I send out, because I'm trying to promote the Ombuds thing. So this is from, I don't know whether you people have seen this brochure.
Yep.
I put this out. I mean, does it cover everything? Or is there?
Yeah, I think that the IOA's new marketing is actually very good, and has a lot of quality information explaining the Ombuds office. A lot of us probably refer to that and pull from it to use in our marketing material.
Okay, so what we're going to do is, of course, Daniela, you were going to say something, but after that, you're going to come to that very basic one particular example of what you've done, an example of how you went about it, how for, like, of course, in the organization, was it understood, your role was understood or not, how did that happen, and then what came to you and how you handled it, obviously protecting the confidentiality. So please.
Yeah, of course. So I think my colleagues have said a lot of things that I would also amplify, I guess. One, as Amanda said, my office did not exist. About a year ago, I set up an office for students through the provost office. The provost office at Georgetown asked for this office to be set up. And so my power dynamics, I guess, in the organization are oftentimes between faculty and students. And undergraduate students have a different power dynamic with faculty than graduate students. So confidentiality is crucial. And as everyone is saying, the messaging and communication and sort of you as a PR person, as a spokesperson for the Ombuds office becomes essential and very important. I have had people come to my office and say, well, how do I know that, so-and-so is not going to find out that I spoke to you? Or, you've been hired by the university, so you are an employee of the university. So how do I know that you're going to have my best interest at heart? So a lot of what we do is really explain our role. And yes, we are being paid by our organizations. And at the same time, we are independent of those kinds of structures. And this is how. I even tell students or visitors or, whether it's faculty, staff, I have everyone, alums coming to my office. I will say to them that if someone asks me whether you have visited the office, my response is I neither confirm nor deny if this person has been to my office. I don't tell them even whether they have or have not, unless I'm doing shuttle diplomacy on behalf of the visitor and they have asked me or told me that I can specifically use their name. And I have done that. I have gone between faculty and students and facilitated conversations and kept everything confidential that I felt needed to be confidential or that the visitor has asked me specifically to keep confidential. Even when I'll just stop here. I'll say one more thing and then stop.
Yeah, I was going to cut you off that, but yeah, please.
Sorry, even if, sometimes as ombuds, we need to do fact finding. So someone will come to your office with an issue, and then you need to figure out, okay, which campus resource do I need to talk to in order to understand the policy? So if I go to that office, I will also tell the person I'm talking to, a staff person or resource person, at the end of this meeting, I want to make sure that whatever I am telling the visitor or the student, that it's okay with you that I share certain information. So before we leave this meeting, I'm going to tell you what I feel like I can share with the student and what I feel like I can't share with the student. Just so that I'm also have the trust of the people who are at my institution. Because without that, I can't do my job either. So I'm sorry if I spoke too long, Vikram.
No,
It's
no,
back
long
to
is
you.
not a problem. I was just going to cut you off at that point when you said that at the point when I'm doing that shuttle diplomacy, at that point, I mean, people get to know them, whoever's visited me or whatever. Is that the point when mediation starts? Are you moving into that mediator role? I mean, this is where I think the discussion kind of was supposed to be about, maybe. So what do you think?
That's a really good question. I feel like there's so much overlap with what we talk about when we say mediation or mediator role. Yeah, I'm gonna think about that. I see Aaron has unmuted. So Aaron, you take it
So
away.
nicely, everyone puts it onto the other person.
Yeah, let me think about that. I feel like I'm in the mediator
Okay.
role often, Vikram. That's sort of my answer. When I'm engaging in shuttle diplomacy, I'm always aware of the different sides and who's going to listen and how I'm going to, act as a sort of designated neutral, which is a loaded term, impartial, multi-partial, however you want to say it.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, where we might get to, I don't know whether we'll get there or not, but the fact is that the terminology, because we have one session on terminology and mediation, is terminology coming in the way? Because of the fact that even mediation is not something that one party is going to a mediator and saying, we want to mediate this. It's not necessary that it's going to go into a mediation. It's not that, I mean, you reach out to the other side, maybe that mediation also doesn't happen. But if it is a process where you are available as whatever name called, let's not, for a moment, let's not say ombuds, because there is a certain understanding of an ombuds for you. For any other XYZ name, whatever, you can keep it. But a person in the organization who's now, if it's an individual or it is a panel, depending on the organization, is available for someone to say, look, I feel that this needs to be mediated. That's one thing. The other aspect could be just the aspect of having someone to talk to, like Bina said, just someone to talk to, but I'm still not being able to do therapy for you. There's another person you'll have to go for therapy, but you can come and talk to me. So, I mean, we're trying to, I think we have to just kind of look at the role, and if we can simplify terminology and be able to take it where people understand it a little better, so that we're not working around something which seems to be an alien process to them, although the process is understood by them, what the ombuds are. Just a thought. I mean, there is no such conclusion that has to happen, just thoughts that we are putting out, and we can have more elaborate discussion. So Aaron, you were saying something.
Actually, I don't have anything to add right now.
My God, she passed the baton to you and you were saying, no, that hot potato, everyone's passing it on. Amanda definitely has something to say. So Amanda, please.
Always. These people
Yes.
know.
I know. Look, imagine, I know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was thinking, you asked that question of, is that when you step into a mediator space? And what first came for me was, it really depends on the visitor, right? First and foremost, we serve the person in the room. And if that person has been adamant that they are not comfortable having a direct conversation of any kind, mediation in that sense of putting people in a room to mediate a conversation between them doesn't happen. And so other kinds, I mean, I think of shuttle diplomacy as a way of mediation, right? If I'm going to go back and forth, right, I become that shuttle mediator. But it really, first and foremost, our job, from my perspective, is to serve the person in the room. And so at my organization, I think at all of our organizations, there's power at play. And so for a lot of people, they don't feel like it would make sense or be helpful to get in the room. I'll also say, in my practice, I tell people, if we're option generating, right, and I'm saying, well, you could file a formal grievance, you could try to go talk to them yourself, I could facilitate a conversation, right, we could get together, and they say, oh, I think I'd like that. I then tell them my process, which is, I always have a conversation with the other person first, right? I don't want to get surprised. I want to know what's happening. But I also tell them that decision in the end ends with, it comes to me, right? And I will tell you, I have told people no. I have said, you both agreed to be in a room, but I don't actually think that's healthy. I think I'm not going to create a space for continued harm. And it doesn't feel like either of you is really in a place where you want to hear what the other one has to say. And so I'm happy to keep talking and working on different solutions and different ways to work together. But really, right, it's not worth my time. Like, I'm not going to sit in a room just so you two can yell at each other, but you don't actually want to move forward. Yeah.
Bina does want to come in, but Bina, you're not coming in now. Not right now. First, I want to take Harshanya's view, because she hasn't got affected by what you people have been doing. She's starting off. So the idealism that she comes in, thought process that she comes in for Ombuds, let's understand that. Then we'll see whether in terms of practice, have you people taken it somewhere else? Is a different understanding? Yeah, Harshanya, what do you say about the Ombuds and the role and everything else?
I don't have a lot to say, since I am aspiring and haven't served in that capacity just yet. Just very interesting, some of the comments that are made, or just based off of what I've heard already and knowing some of the people in the room, just from the training that I've had in school and the courses, it's just very interesting, the dynamics between, the Ombuds and the institution or organization that you work with, and also understanding the difference with facilitating and mediation, how the mediation isn't really a term that is normally used in these types of settings. By me being a mediator, so I get it, I understand the facilitation part is more, for facilitation is more the term that would normally get used. So just listening to the conversation is very interesting.
Maybe, Harsanya, the idea was for you not to listen to the conversation. Think you haven't heard anything. There was a concept of the Ombuds that you had before this conversation, before you heard them. What was that? And how were you going to practice when you were called in by an organization? What was your plan?
That's something I have to process. I mean, I think being in an Ombuds position is just basically case by case, visitor by visitor. So everybody is different. Every visitor is different. So I think I would probably have more of a better answer for you if I had someone that I had actually come in and serve as an Ombuds for.
Harsanya, then the answers will be the same as what they're giving. We wanted a different answer, because Amanda said, look, I'm not going to touch certain aspects. I don't have to facilitate the conversation. I don't want you guys can't just talk to each other. No, I won't do it. Maybe you did not go with that thought process, but now listening to her, you'll say, oh, maybe that's an option. I didn't know this was an option. So I'm just saying, we don't know where it's going to go. So undiluted, what was your concept as you would have gone without anyone telling you anything else? How would you have gone about it? Is there a pure concept of Ombuds that you had in your mind? And has that changed over time, is what I'm trying to just kind of.
No, it hasn't changed. That is very much the concept. It has not changed. Just piggybacking off of Amanda, I think that some people, depending on their circumstances, they may say, well, maybe there's an opportunity here. Let me see if there is an opportunity for these people to come together and maybe come to some type of resolution for whatever their dispute is. But if, like she says, by her being a professional, she can pretty much read the room and just from the concern itself, she would know whether or not it's a good idea to even bring those two people together. I think it's just a matter of the person, the visitor, and also the Ombuds in terms of the direction that they would take it. I really don't have a lot of another answer for you besides that.
No, I'll tell you, the thing is that mediation is also no one set way you have to do it. You don't have to get everyone together. You don't have to have joint sessions. You can only have private sessions with parties, and you can obviously, without them ever meeting, there can be settlements which happen. So mediation is a very, very flexible process. So I'm not saying that you have to do that. So, I mean, that's just, Bina has to come in and then we'll go. Yes, Bina.
Yeah, I think I wanted to also add to what Amanda was saying, but to what you and Harshanya were saying, Vikram, the skills are transferable. I think someone said that earlier. The skills are very transferable. They overlap, but it's being disciplined in your Ombuds approach as to how you Ombuds, right? And being true to the principles that we've learned in the Ombuds Association, the foundations class, and that class is worthwhile taking, even just for knowledge, because they teach you very well how to define those boundaries, and then it's up to you really to keep to them. So with mediation, in most agencies, I'll tell you, or even when I do nonprofit contract work, I will bring in an outside mediator if I have to make sure that process between that process of mediation stays neutral, as well as my process as an ombudsman stays neutral. So the parties, and especially the leadership, doesn't confuse those lines, right? And it's really also sometimes a liability issue. Like, you want to have another process for mediation so that you as an ombuds are not going to practice that. That's very important to distinguish as well. And going back to what Amanda was saying, I agree. I think that if you don't feel, as an ombuds, you don't feel safe, or you don't feel like it's going to be good to bring people together in a facilitated discussion, it's really your call as well. I've done it before myself, as Amanda has done, but also I've, and I'm sure many of you have done it, Amanda, I'm sure you have too, where you set up ground rules before the discussion, so that if there is a power play, let's say there's a supervisor and an employee, and the supervisor even thinks to use their position as a way to get what they want, I will stop it immediately. And I've had to in the past as well, even though I've said, today you're going to show up as Bina and you're going to show up as Aaron, and not your positions, because that's where we're going to settle the differences here. It's a personality conflict. But at the minute you insert your position as a way to get what you want or to settle something here, we're going to stop it. It's not going to happen.
I'll tell you, Bina, what you've come out with, of course, we'll discuss it with everyone also. Yeah. But the fact is that, are there different skills for an ombuds and a mediator? That's one part. The other thing is, handling power imbalances is something that a mediator does. Doesn't stay away from it, because obviously mediations, there will always be a power imbalance. We had a session on that, also part of the conference, but it is an important aspect. Power imbalances will be there. So are we going to move away from the process when the power imbalance thing comes in? Because we can't, because organizations, definitely that issue will always come up, because most of these issues will be between the subordinate and the senior. So I'm just trying to understand, how would you look at that? I mean, how are you looking at it? Yes, Stacey, what, just Bina or Stacey? Okay.
I break in just for a second and let people, if anyone needs to go because it's been an hour, please feel free. I told you it would be about an hour. Please stay on as long as you want, but I just didn't want you to
Stacey, like what you're really saying is that Vikram is forcing you to stay here, and you can get out if you want. There is an option. That's what
it is, Vikram. I'm just coming in.
Are you trying to say they will not tell us? They will tell us. They will tell us. They will tell us. They will tell us. This is an important discussion. We are getting somewhere. So, yes, Bina. So these two aspects, the skill aspect and power imbalances being something where a mediator has to handle. Does the ombuds also has to handle that, or are they going to move away in that situation? Yeah.
Great questions. I think it just, I mean, I've sort of learned this over my experience and through hard conversations I've had to have, or dealings I've had, where you kind of make a call on the spot, and then the next time around when something like this comes up, you just set up those ground rules ahead of time, right? But as a mediator, I never really had to. I've always had ground rules, but I've never had to check people on, or check managers on their positions. As an ombuds, I'll tell you, just doing the internal organizational ombuds practices, I've had to, and that's again, just through experience, because I've seen where managers or even senior leaders take advantage of their positions and try to force a compromise when it's really, you're not obligated to reach a compromise, right? Even if getting people to the table, in my opinion, even in a mediation, is the success of just of that practice itself, because it's hard to get people to the table, especially if it's voluntary. So, but I open it up to everybody else who've had experience.
Everyone wants to throw the potato out. Yeah, Jared, please. So, look, Amanda has gloves. She hasn't told us she's wearing gloves. So whatever hot potato comes to us, she's willing to catch it. But Jared, you haven't told us, given us your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And I think you had asked a question about like going into the ombuds field. I had a background as a mediator, and I think my perception that the mediation practice in the ombuds position hasn't changed that much. And I think you need all the skills of a mediator, and a lot of them that you do end up using. I see mediation as you mentioned, this very broad, a flexible process that changes and moves, and could be anything from informal court to a mediation could be considered stepping in between two siblings. Right. And so mediation just is a process of having someone facilitate any negotiation, any communication. And I think you do that a lot in the ombuds role. And so when you're talking about different skills, something like judging and balancing different power imbalances, that definitely comes into play. Being able to be an empathetic listener, that comes into play. Being able to maybe it's like facilitate or form apologies or have forgiveness or incorporate those into your practice as a mediator. I'm seeing a lot of hands popping up, so I'm not sure if
I know the order. Okay,
hot buttons.
I know the order. Harshanya,
and
Bina, and Aaron is the order. But before that, what I really want to get at is that we have, of course, the countries in the world where mediation itself hasn't taken off. People are just getting familiar with mediation. So, do we want to introduce another word there, or if organizational mediator, if that's an option, or does that in any way take away from the process, is also what we're going to discuss. But first, let's get Harshanya. Harshanya, you had raised your hand first. What?
Oh, okay. Well, just to add a comment to what you just said. I'm sorry. So what you just said. I think that there is a difference when you're mediating just based off of the discussion or facilitating a conflict between two people, two visitors in an organization, and when you're actually mediating between two parties outside of that. It's just as Aaron stated before, you're understanding that when the visitor comes in, nobody knows that the visitor is there but you and the visitor. Nobody even has a clue of who that person is, or the fact that they even came into the office and set up an appointment. As to where when you're mediating outside of that process, both parties know and have signed an agreement that they are going to mediate to come to some type of agreement. There is also, we talked about shuttle diplomacy a few times already in the conversation. Mediators do shuttle diplomacy if they feel that it is necessary. If they're, at the beginning, I know when I've done my mediations, I will have both people in the room. Right now it's virtual, but have both people in the same room to give their stance. And then I'm automatically caucusing, like you're over here and you're in a separate breakout room, and if I feel necessary to bring you back together, because as I stated before, and as we mentioned before in terms of confidentiality, there might be something that someone says that they don't want the other party to know. But there's definitely having to listen. Those listening skills are incredibly important, because you're trying to figure out using your negotiation skills at the same time to figure out how I can get both people, because they're very much determined and stayed on their position of things. How do I get them to move so that we can go ahead and resolve this conflict?
Yeah, okay. That's a process that happens, of course, be it mediation or whatever, those things will definitely come up. But we'll get to that part. But Bina wants to come in first. Yeah, Bina.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that one of the skills that I learned in grad school, I did a doctorate in conflict resolution. And this is where I really got the bulk of my foundation of mediation and conflict management. Actually, I'll say it's like conflict transformation, also known as transformative mediation, right? We learn about that. It's one of my favorite techniques. But we also use that in the ombuds world, where we ask parties to put yourselves in the shoes of the other person, and listen to understand what they're going through in this conflict as well. So I think the skills are transferable. So that's one thing. And then Vikram, what you were saying, how do you introduce something like mediation or even ombudsman in a country where they've never had it? I think one of the best ways to do it is to just start with community mediations or community facilitations, listening groups, things like that, just on the softer end, to sort of get them into the habit of it, and then educating them as you go along from the community perspective, which is a whole nother ballgame and is in the field as it is, because community mediations are not easy. They're fun, they're complex, but they're not easy either. But it's a good way to, I guess, to get your foot in the door, to start opening those channels up.
No, that you're saying in terms of promotion of mediation, that's where it starts. I'm saying that in organizational ombuds, instead of that, we call them organizational mediators, which are available. And I mean, like I said, be it an individual, be it a panel, whether they're available to the organization whenever. So is that how it can be put out? Because adding another word to it, and then this same conversation where, okay, ombuds does this but doesn't do this, goes up till this point but doesn't go up till that point? Are we confusing the user? For me, the biggest issue of terminology has been confusing the user who has no idea. Transformative, evaluative are words we know because we're in the mediation world. That person has a dispute or a issue which they want to resolve. Please help me resolve it is all they're saying. How you're doing it? Look, if they're not comfortable in a process, be it the people talk about this facilitative, evaluative concept. If they're not comfortable with you being evaluative, they'll tell you, look, I don't want you to tell me what to do. I know what to do. You were supposed to facilitate the conversation. They'll tell you that. So I'm just saying that let's not confuse the user. So is this another word which is confusing the user? Do we have an option? Amanda definitely has something to say, but Aaron is coming in first. Yes, Aaron.
Quickly, as an ombuds, that's not something we would handle. Being an organizational mediator, we got EEOD and we have HR who can serve in those capacities. So we're informal. So we're not keeping any notes or anything like that. We're not writing any agreements and contracts. So I think that's something we can stay away from. But I wanted to comment quickly on something that Amanda said
But Aaron, your volume has gone down a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to comment on something that Amanda and Ms. Brown said. Sometimes people use our process to weaponize as a weapon against those people in power. So we talk about power imbalance. So one thing that Amanda talked about is that sometimes she gets information from one person and talks to the supervisor or another person just to gauge whether or not it makes sense to have a facilitated conversation. But sometimes for me, it's fact finding, because you may share information with me and then you may give me permission to go talk to the other person. And then when I get that information, it's like, hold up, you know you wrong. Why you have me call this person when you know that you got this letter of reprimand and there's all this evidence against you? Stop it. But that's in one scenario. And then there's another scenario when you're in an actual mediation, because I've been in an actual mediation where information does come out. So when Ms. Brown talked about going into a caucus and you get information, you're like, hold up, why are we even in this mediation? You know you called out sick for 25 days straight. Why are you wasting our resources on your foolishness? So we have to be very mindful that sometimes people's intentions are not pure. They're just trying to weaponize the process in their face.
Yeah. But Aaron, that statement applies to life in general. Everyone's intentions are not pure. That is definitely a general statement for life. But in this case, I'm saying when you said mediation and you're talking about the HR, I mean, HR is definitely a third party, which obviously they can't do mediation for sure. Definitely. They're part of the process there. So I don't understand what you said there about the HR. What were you trying to say there when you said about mediation?
I was saying that that's more of their function than ours as ombudsmen because we're informal. So it would always be an organization facilitator and not a mediator.
No, because HR can definitely not do the mediation because definitely they have to look at the organizational. They are the organization. Let's just look at it that way. So the organization doing mediation for the organization, I think, might not be able to. They might not be able to do it. So anyway, Amanda has something interesting to tell us. Yes, Amanda.
Well,
Harshani after that. Amanda had to come first. Yeah. Amanda.
HR does do mediation in most instances, or a compliance office or an equal opportunity office within an organization. What I was going to say is, to answer your question, could we call it organizational mediator? And the reason I say no to that is I think it's a square rectangle situation, right? All rectangles, not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles. So ombuds do mediation, but that is not the extent of what we do, right? My charge is to look for informal information, like informal data and trends. I do a lot of upward reporting, anonymized general trend of things, to sort of be that place where informal information comes in. And again, to serve visitors in the room. So 70-80% of my cases, I only talk to one person. There's no fact finding, there's no shuttle diplomacy, there's no informal investigation or mediation or facilitation. It's coaching, right? It's a lot of conflict coaching, helping somebody who comes in and says, my coworker ate my yogurt and I'm really upset about it. And I can't believe that this keeps happening, right? To come in and say that's the problem, to help them get to, I feel left out of my team because they all eat lunch together and I don't get to eat lunch with them and I don't get invited. And then my stuff gets left in the fridge and they think it's, up for grabs because I'm not with them, right? So there's, getting to these other places, right? In conflict theory, right? From position to interest, right? Helping to understand what's going on. So I don't think that calling us organizational mediators actually encompasses all of the role of what an ombuds does.
Okay, I mean, the thing is that being a mediator and doing mediations is different. A role of a mediator is larger than the mediation. So because,
Sure.
I mean, we have, of course, Ken Cloke has come up in various of my events, and he's also put out articles on the role of mediators. So there is that facilitating conversations on the larger level, and what else can a mediator do? So that's what I'm saying. Maybe just the fact that the mediation doesn't happen, but is it a role of a mediator what you're doing? You were saying maybe conflict coaching. So that is an interesting part that you said. That is a major part of your work is that. So there is this aspect is not so much, maybe not so much of it. So that's why we're saying, I was asking you people to give one example each of something that you have gone through so that we live, I'm in the sense representative largely of what you do. So any example like that. But Harshanya is coming in, then Daniela, even if you had nothing to say, you are coming in because we haven't heard from you for some time. So Harshanya, yeah, please.
I just wanted to add that I don't know if calling an organizational ombuds an organizational mediator. I agree with Amanda on that is a great idea. Maybe an organization can have a separate person or role that would be a mediator. You do have some organizations to where their mediator is their attorney that is on board. You do have and I think it's more so about establishing trust. If a person is coming in to address concerns and they're talking to someone who is a mediator who is also a staff as an attorney or of counsel at the organization, are they really going to be willing to give information? Are they going to share information or their concerns or their grievances? Because at that point, they may see that person as an advocate, maybe like HR or something to that degree, that's going to actually represent or side, I don't want to say side with or represent, but more so do what's in the best interest of the organization instead of looking at the concern holistically.
Because actually, when I use the word mediator, I always have Stacey, like she said, there is that mediator mindset. So a person with a mediator mindset available in an organization who's not part of the hierarchy of the organization. So, I mean, something on those lines is what I was talking about. Daniela, even if you don't have something to say, you'll have to say something. Yeah.
So I may be one of the few people who has no mediator background. I mean, as I said, I'm a cultural anthropologist. So I don't come from the same types of lens that a lot of you may have. So I don't really have much to add here. I'm actually really interested in the overlap that I see. I think you should call yourself an organizational ombuds at some point, Vikram, because it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is ombudsing as well as mediator. At the same time, what kind of binds the ombuds together is the standards of practice and the code of ethics that we receive and the charters that we put together that really inform how we practice. And some people have the International Ombuds Organization or Association is really the organization that I look to as the International Ombuds Association, IOA, that has taught me how to become and has trained me to become an ombuds. However, all of my experience, my education as an anthropologist, as a consultant, as an entrepreneur, as an undergraduate dean who understands the campus, which I was for 7 years, those are also what is informing my practice. So I'm just saying I'm enjoying this conversation on an intellectual level to understand more about how you see mediation and I guess how I, as an ombuds, am practicing mediation.
So, but Daniela, look, the thing is that do you have the mediator mindset or not is what is important. Whether you have the background in the sense of being a mediator doesn't matter. So, you bring in that mediator mindset, and everything else around it, the formal structure and whatever charter that you have, is just putting certain words to exactly what you do. Otherwise, it's just putting some words. But only thing is, Jared kind of laughed at a certain point when you were saying something. Jared, what was that smile for? Something you found something funny? Was it? What was it? Something Daniela said, and you were.
I'm a natural, happy, and smiley person. I would agree with a lot of what Daniela said. I think to your point, I think there are two reasons why I think an organizational mediator as a position doesn't fit organizational ombuds. They've already been broadly said, but I think there are additional limitations of ombuds given the additional rules and constraints and charges that they do follow, as well as their scope. I think there is a wider scope of work that the ombuds do than a mediator does. Amanda talked a little bit about this, and it asked for an example, Vikram, and an additional one is serving and identifying disputes and issues on a system-wide level that I don't think a mediator does. And so looking at trends, looking at repeated issues or conflicts, and staying with the organization to work through or to advocate for different changes that may be needed in an organization are one thing that wouldn't fit the title of organizational mediator, but would for as an ombuds.
No, Jared, what I'm trying to do is that because there is a certain understanding of the mediator word that you have put through, that the mediator does this much and maybe not more. I'm saying that the anonymous reporting to the board is not something which is something which a person with a mediator mindset who's part of the organization can't do. It's the same thing. I'm saying the function, according to me, seems to be the same. It's just that there is a certain structure that you say, okay, these are the things that this person is doing and the role of it. Only the Amanda part of it on the conflict coaching part of it. That part of it we'll have to look at. If that's a major part of that role, then whether that fits in or not, then because those might be. Look, I'm not saying, look, if someone comes to me with some matter, it's not that I say, look, you must mediate. I also tell them, of course, that you can sit with the other side on this issue. I do that. So that's same thing with lawyers. Lawyers were not supposed to, you were not supposed to go to them and say, oh, let's litigate. It was not supposed to be like that. There is this whole concept of collaborative practice, which is coming up now, which we had a discussion also on. Lawyers were supposed to be the people that you went to, and they were supposed to guide you. Okay, this is not something that you should be fighting about, or this, you should try mediation or whatever else. It did not happen that way. But if it did not happen that way, doesn't mean that it is not the way it should be. So I'm just trying to say that, are we looking at it? Can we look at it a little differently? Terminology only from the fact that we're adding another word into people's vocabulary, where the basic aspect of the mediation part of it has not really been popular for them. Look, Jared, you have to look at it from the global perspective, because in the US, yes, mediation, it's a mature market, and Ombuds is also something which has been practiced. Of course, I don't know how popular it is. Of course, you'll tell me about that, but it is there. So the terminology may be understood. Let's take it global. Let's see, can we get a person with that role, with a word which then helps in the promotion of mediation also. So Bina also hasn't come in for some time, and I'm sure she has something to say.
I do have so many thoughts, but I have to hop off in a couple of minutes. All I can say is, I guess it just depends on how globally the organizations are setting up their offices. When we look at like the UN, and if we look at the World Trade Organization, and any other organization, not even those, are they creating their offices based on, and their programs on, Western ways of doing things? Because if that's the case, then I wouldn't think that organizational mediator would work. It's confusing, I'll be honest with you. For the average person who doesn't understand the difference between a mediator and an ombuds, it can be confusing. But at the end of the day, I think it's up to each agency or each organization, and then the amount of education and outreach you do to make those distinctions, that would really ultimately do and it would be an ongoing thing, because every time you have a visitor, A, they may be confused, or B, it could be a new visitor every time, and then they just still don't know the difference. So it's important for us to reiterate it every time as well. So it's not to say it's not doable, but it's just,
let me show you this. This is a compliance advisor ombudsman, which the World Bank has. Now, what is the activity that they do? These are projects where communities are affected. And then we have these people who are going to in some way help in resolving that aspect of it. So, I mean, they call it the ombuds, but they actually have mediators doing work on the ground there. So I'm saying that word by itself, is it really understood the same way? And is there really a differentiation being made out there largely? I mean, because if first, are we going to look at the work done, or are we going to go with the word? So, I mean, out of the whole discussion, I'm telling you, the only thing that Amanda said about conflict coaching is that that being an element which will maybe have other aspects to it, rather than maybe a certain other skills required. I don't know what else is required. Of course, Amanda can elaborate on it. So that is the only aspect which I feel that maybe then you do not need a person with those skills who's actually going to be mediating or has the mediator mindset. Maybe a certain other skills are required. So can you divide the role into that part, someone going there, and if required, that person sends it to the organizational mediator being person with a mediator mindset, that kind of thing. So can we have two layers there in that sense? Amanda is the best person to answer that.
I think that it's really interesting, the idea of mediator mindset. I think by Bina.
Bye, Bina. Everyone has to say bye to Bina. Bye, Bina. Thank you for coming in. See you. Yeah, Amanda.
I think that many of us do act from that idea of mediator mindset. For me, at least, I think for many of us, that conflict coaching is the primary sort of day-to-day of what we do. I was trying to think of a good case example, because I think you keep trying to get somebody to give a case example. And
we've been trying very hard. We've been trying very hard.
But and I'll see if I can get to one. But I think that linguistically, right, it's similar to, so ombuds sort of doesn't have enough meaning in the world, right? We often have to explain the role, and mediator almost has too much meaning for us to be called organizational mediators, right? So to just limit into that mediator world, because it has so much meaning, I think limits, whereas ombuds, we have to constantly promote. You brought up the World Bank. The World Bank also has organizational ombuds who practice to IOA standards, are members of the IOA, active members. And so I've never seen the compliance.
No, yeah, that's why I was trying to clarify to you, because they have the ombuds, which are the organizational ombuds who look at the employee situation. That's one. But they have, the World Bank has these compliance advisor ombuds and ombudsmen, and there the activity basically is these projects being affected by the World Bank funds projects in countries. And with those projects, when they come out, it's a person who is obviously a private party in that country who's implementing that project. But during the implementation of the project, the community is affected. Then they come in to try and resolve that issue. So that is a totally different concept from what you were saying, because it's not. So the employee part of it, but
the idea of classical ombudsmen, right? Which is part of the reason that IOA actually just changed official language to ombuds as opposed to ombudsman, was because there are organizational ombuds who couldn't call themselves ombudsman, because in certain countries, ombudsman has a legal standing and a legal name. And that's more of the classical sort of governmental ombuds that you're talking, or ombudsman that you're talking about. Whereas organizational ombuds sort of do this internal constituency work. So I'll give a case example that I had.
Finally.
Well, it's hard for us because we don't want to give, if this is going to live on YouTube, we don't want to give things away that are going to, reveal anything. But
the thing that you're reporting to the board, you're reporting something to the board.
But I don't report specific cases to the board ever.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, general.
I've had 100 and something cases. They all talk about these sorts of trends, which I'm happy to talk about what my trends look like. But on a specific case, I had a visitor who had shifted roles within the organization, and in part did that because they could take the train to the job. They had spoken to the person who had the position previously. That person took the train in, and when they started, the supervisor said, well, the train doesn't get here until 15 after the hour, so you can't take the train because you have to be here on time. And so my job was, I could offer to do sort of that, classical idea of mediation, right? Do you want to sit down with your boss and talk about it? Or can I find a path where you might be able to talk about this, right? But really my job when that person came to me was just to help them process what was happening and identify for themselves what they wanted to do with it, right? And so it was sort of that coaching idea of, what's the balance for you? Could you, are there other ways to ask for flexible schedule besides that 15 minutes, right? There are other places to identify. How important is this for you? I'll tell you that person left the organization eventually for many reasons, but that was a piece of it, right? And is this indicative of a different conflict, right? It feels like there's something more than just having to get there early in order to be on time. There's also this feeling of being treated differently than other staff members because we know that this boss treated other people differently or held a different standard. And so what does that mean for my working relationship and how do I move forward with that? So there's a lot of things that come up in something very simple. I had a case when I first started of someone who really liked their supervisor and went to bat for them and spoke up for them. And other people didn't like them. And so it made them feel detached from their team because they sort of became this middle person. And through a lot of our conversation and just listening to that person talk, even about things that were unwork related, right? We just sort of let people wander in their talking. I was able to eventually say, it sounds like it took you a really long time in life to figure out where you fit. And it was like this aha moment for a visitor to say, oh, right, I've always attached myself to someone else to feel like I fit in somewhere. And so I've done that with my supervisor, but it's made me feel left out, right? So we are not therapists. I tell people all the time, no substitute for good therapy. Here's how you get an actual clinical counselor. But in the meantime, we do a lot of that humanist uncovering work.
But I'm
That
just
was a
thinking
long around.
no, perfect. But only thing when you say visitor, it sometimes sounds like a visitor from some space or something like that.
I know.
Like we had a visitor from somewhere. But I'm just thinking that if you divide it into two, I'm just saying that there is an organizational conflict coach, which takes care of largely what you are saying you do. And then there is that organizational mediator. So you've broken up the job of the ombuds into two for a moment. I'm just a thought. Amanda, it's just a thought. We're not breaking up your job. You've got your job. We're not taking it away. We're just thinking that if there is a two-step process there, the skill required for the person with the mediator mindset is that something which being different, you need some different person to be able to do that. And merging these two together, are you really serving the purpose the way it should be? Just a thought, because like after this, you're going to be telling me the popularity of it in the US, how it's being taken, how an organization taking it, where are the issues that are coming up, all that. So Harshanya has something to say there. Yes, Harshanya. Yes.
Oh, I didn't have anything to say.
Every little movement of yours matters. The moment you reached out, it means you were going out for something. Look, that's how this is the online world. This is the only way I get to know that you have something to say. So you have to sit so still, no hand movement. So
I don't have a comment.
Okay. So Stacey, you haven't obviously said it too much about it, but these are the elements also that you have to address. This aspect that can this whole activity be divided into two of these segments, and also if there's popularity, damn good. If it's not, what are the reasons for that? Yes, Stacey.
I really think part of the beauty of ombuds is the complexity, and not for the people in the job, but for the functioning of it for people. And so I guess it sounds a little reductionist to me to split it out for simplicity. I guess that would be my two cents on that. But obviously I have to point out my bias here because I strongly believe in the organizational ombuds concept. And so I'm kind of going to stick to that. But I will say it is something developing. I think something I've heard through all this is that it is developing and changing, and we're teaching people what it is and learning where we
Stacey,
go.
can we just say bye to her? Shania, she's leaving, so we can just say bye to her then. Bye, Shania. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Irish.
Yeah. Yes, Stacey.
Yeah, so I would not split them. And I think people can handle, our lives are very complex. The things we have are very complex. I think we can handle complex ways to handle those problems and start informing and living into the systems and the helps that we have within an organization.
Well, I tell you, we have to, of course, look at the popularity of it, because I mean, there was a symposium that I did last year, which of course I have to boast about. It was called the Woodstock of Mediation. There were 97 speakers from 45 countries in that, and someone from the US who had some experience of being an ombuds said this hasn't really taken off here. It wasn't really, I mean, organizations are not looking at it as adding value. So is that the case, or was that an individual experience? So maybe Jared, do you want to start the discussion on this?
Sure. Unfortunately, I don't have as much data as I'd like in terms of exactly how many numbers of ombuds organizations are. And Amanda, yeah, can speak to that. But I'd say that it certainly is a growing field, and it would, from some of its more growing popularity a few decades ago, it certainly has gotten a lot more standing in terms of it has already in government and now higher education, but more and more we're seeing some larger private companies and corporations taking up ombuds or ombuds offices to be able to handle the unique situations within the organizations that the skills and the limitations of an ombuds is really meant to handle.
Because one is the aspect of having a person with that name in the organization for the sake of having it. One is finding value in it, and actually that value being perceived not just by the board or the HR or whatever, by the people who work in the organization also. So do we have something? Amanda, of course, has something on that.
Well, I have IOA's data because I'm on the board, so I have some of that. So as far as IOA is concerned, right? So if we can measure by the number of people who identify as ombuds to the point of joining an organization or an association, so currently IOA has has 1,067 members as of the last membership report. And if you look back a year, that's a little more than 100 members from the year before, but it's almost 300 members from new members from 2020. And so I think what we see is new positions opening. We do see new offices being created, but it is the mission of IOA, one of the strategic plan sort of pieces is to grow ombuds. It is, I think that's part of that. The word mediation has a lot of standing and has a lot of meaning and is something that's sort of globally understood, though maybe not the mediator mindset or even the Singapore Convention, right? I'm not sure how many people would point to those things or know those things, but the idea of mediation as a concept, I mean, I was a peer mediator in middle school, right? Like the idea of mediation is something that starts early. Whereas ombuds being a more sort of niche profession and being specifically even an organizational ombuds is something that is smaller. And so working to grow that. I think something else you said earlier, Vikram, was about identifying as a mediator. I think many of us identify as an ombuds, right? I don't identify as a mediator. I identify as an ombuds. It's really a core part of who I am. And for me, the light bulb went off when I learned about the ombuds profession, and I was in grad school in my 30s. And so it was later in life that I came to it, but later, it's pretty early still. But I think that we see more people, we see more aspiring ombuds, we see more people who are looking at it as a first career, and we see more offices opening. So I wouldn't say those things are growing in parallel. Unfortunately, I think more people are coming in than jobs are opening, but that's part of what we're working towards, is to grow those positions. So you pulled up that marketing stuff before, and it talked about ROI, and that's a big piece of pushing not just what the role is, but what the investment of that role is and what the return on that investment is.
Because I tell you
And I
why.
also have to go in 2 minutes.
Perfect. The only thing that I'm trying to get at is the aspect of perception of the value received from an ombuds. That is what, because everything starts from there. If the organization and the people working in that organization see a value in it, then that develops. But is that happening or not happening? Because look, the numbers that you're talking about in relation to the US is nothing, because you're talking about organizations as in companies and colleges and so
Those
many other.
numbers are global.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The numbers are nothing compared to the numbers that you need, because if you're talking on every college, there must be sort of at least 5,000 colleges minimum. I don't even know how much. I'm just giving a vague figure. Then there will be how many companies there will be in the US? Amazing number, I'm sure. So if we're talking about that number, then this is not a new thing. I mean, Ombuds has been spoken about in the US for years. It's not a new thing that's come up. So if those numbers are not there, what is the reason? So that I'm just saying that if there are issues that have come up and people have not found value in it, first, do we need to change it, modify it? I'm saying making it easier for you to say that, look, for some other part of the world. Because if I say in the US, yes, so we're already doing it in the US and we know what we're doing. You don't have to tell us what we do. So that's why I'm trying to take it outside. Although the same things will apply in the US also, according to me, but we are having the global discussion. So Amanda.
Well, I think, I mean, those numbers come globally, and I agree with you that, you know, if you think the longest college programs in the US have been open for 50 years. And a lot of them came out of protest movements and the desire to help students organize, and had pieces of that classical ombuds and then morphed into organizational ombuds. But in general, it is still very young in the grand concept of sort of conflict work. IOA is not that old, right? And so I think a lot of work is being done to figure out how do we create new ombuds roles by promoting the profession, by helping people. And I think it's really an education piece. We do things like this. We show up to these kinds of conferences, right? We go to community college conferences and governmental things, and we work with the ABA, and we, you know, work with international organizations to try to show up to say, you know, this has value, not just to me, not just to the organization, but to the people we serve. That's where I measure my value. But
I think, Amanda, how do you even say these kind of conferences? I don't think there is. I find my conference to be the unique conference.
It is very unique.
Yeah, that's what I say. There are no other these kind of conferences.
Well, not sure. If you want to take that mindset, that's fine. But I mean, to say that to go into spaces.
Yeah, I understand. You don't have to justify. It's just a joke. It's just we'll leave it there. But can we have some kind of a survey done from sending it out into organizations where they're already ombuds, and to be able to get from the organization perspective, which means the board, yes, HR maybe, and of course the people in the organization. One, are they familiar with this person who's appointed there, and what do they think the role is? And then if they Ombuds, you have to do that, Amanda. You have to do this. That's the only way we are going to find out, because if we have to take it further and take it globally, then whatever has already happened, you have a foundation there. Let's just check if the foundation is all right, or if there were some issues there. Maybe you put 4 pillars, you were supposed to put 5 pillars, maybe 1 pillar, or maybe you put 5, you had to take out 1. We don't know what has to happen. So can we get that? Is that possible? Is that something that we can get some?
I mean, I think that work gets done. It gets done individually on levels of each of us do surveying, right? We look for feedback from constituencies, and IOA is constantly looking on ways to ask ombuds for their feedback or to find out what their organizations are saying. But I think the question I would put back to you is, you know, what do you hope is the outcome of that? Or what would be the purpose? I mean, I think that it's a growing profession. And so I don't know if taking stock of what's going right. I think that we are all very clear on what an ombuds is and what we're doing. So I don't know if that's maybe what you're saying is we need to be better educators.
I'm just saying, just a feedback if it's available as to what is the understanding. It was not new. I mean, I'm sure I don't know when the first ombuds must have been appointed by whatever institution. We don't know what that. You would know better.
50 years,
50 years. Like I said,
50
so 50 years is not new. I mean, 50 years means there is some legacy in that organization where the first one was appointed. So maybe we can check there. That's the starting point could be. But then beyond that, wherever it has come in, now Daniela has joined there. She's doing something there. She can check with her organization. If the Ombuds Association is not willing to do it, maybe individuals can do it, just to get a little bit of a clearer idea as to the user. Finally, look, I'm telling you, in mediation or this, anything, the user experience is what matters. Within our world, we keep saying mediation is damn good, mediation is very good. If people are not using it, what is the reason for that? If 100 million cases get filed in the US every year, and we say there are 40-45 years of mediation happening there, why are they not going to mediators first? Is there some information that we have that would be helpful? So
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. That for everything,
The
the
answer is yes.
user experience is all that matters. Everything
Great.
else is just designations and creating things. But it is really giving value to the user is what. But first,
Sure, and I could say, I mean, I could talk to you. Sorry, we're just in conversation, but I could say it's very hard. It's very hard in a confidential setting to get feedback from the users, right? Because all of us struggle with low feedback response rates. If you're handing people a piece of paper, if you're sending them a QR code, if we're not emailing people because we're not creating records, then we can't send them links to surveys. There are all of these steps, and there's a lot of conversation about how to better generate feedback from users, right? From visitors, from clients, whatever you want to call them. But on the bigger scale, I think a lot of us look at numbers, right? We look at how many cases we have, how much utilization, is that growing, is it shrinking? And if we see it reducing, why, right? We ask those questions, we look for those things. So I think individually and within organizations, that work is getting done. And there is some reporting that gets, sorry, my dog is scratching behind me. There is reporting that IOA gets asked, right? As far as there's lots of surveying that gets done around ombuds offices and how robust they are and how they're being done. And there's more work to be done as far as culture setting and growing that IOA is doing. And I've already stayed 5 minutes longer than I need to.
That's so
and
nice.
This is really fun.
We are obliged, majorly obliged. Actually, 5 minutes extra. That's major. I mean, this normally.
I will. That's my calendar.
No, actually, yes, the 1 minute I'll take there. That maybe the Ombuds Association or the Ombuds, maybe they're not the right people to do that survey, because the question that you might put will be maybe a little loaded towards what answer you want. So maybe it has to be done by someone who is not connected to that process. So in the sense they're not directly connected with it. So is it the HR which should do it, or who else should we do it? Maybe that discussion you can have. So thank you very much for coming in, and we'll definitely continue the conversation on this. Yeah. So Daniela, you were saying something. Yep.
Oh, I think Amanda, very eloquently said a lot of the things that came to mind. I will say that in the last 3 years, I'll talk from my institution and for higher education, that the Ombuds profession has become much more understood and popular. I think that because of COVID, because of the pandemic, because of, a lot of what we do is clarify policies and practices of our institution or organization. And there have been so many rapid changes. University administrators trying to figure out sort of what what people are thinking, how they are feeling, what kinds of issues they have, and realizing that there was never, there are certain people that are on campus already or in institutions already, and they weren't enough. So a lot of, just in the last 2 years, I'll say, I think that there has been I would like to see the data. Not everyone is an IOA member, by the way, right? So not all ombuds are part of IOA. So there is other data that we just do not have. I'll say that I set up my office last year. Since then, there has been another ombuds, a faculty ombuds who has been added to our institution, and now a staff ombuds. And none of these existed, these are 3 positions that didn't exist previously. So there is movement. So I can just say from my institution. And I could, if we had time, I could read you some of the testimonies of the user, because you're right, the user experience is very important. From I appreciate you, I had nowhere else to go. Thank you so much. I'm sure you have received these as well. But I think that, as Amanda was saying, because of confidentiality, we can't broadcast all of these things, but I know the impact that I have, and I hope it continues this way.
Jared, you had something to add to that?
I believe, and this may be my last comment before I head out, but yeah, so both from the individual standpoint, when we speak with the people that come and speak with us, which we do call visitors, we do get the feedback from them. From organizations, I think it could be reporting on the annual trends that we have to see how that makes a difference in having those conversations with maybe different department heads to see what recommendations could be made. But I think a lot of the value sometimes comes also from really large singular big cases. So perhaps it's from a university that it turns out there had been this large scandal, and I'm not talking about any university in particular, but in a hypothetical situation, and when a large scandal has broken out, maybe it's regarding admissions or maybe some sort of employment issue, and it's found out how the ombuds is able to work with that, to manage that conflict and to bring it to a much better outcome than it could have been. It shows the value in just even in a single instance of how it can make a very significant impact on the amount of money that a university or organization spends on a conflict, at the time, the brand and reputation of that organization, and also all of those individuals involved with that conflict on how it's made better for them.
Because I was thinking in terms of why this survey thing I was talking about was that from that you would also get to know what is the value that they actually got from it, what part of the process that the ombuds did was where the value was. Because if it is coming down to a certain aspect, which we were talking about, that conflict coaching part of it, this is what was the important part, then maybe the whole structure maybe has to be looked at, the person has to be looked at differently. We don't know. I mean, look, it's just a conversation, Jared. It's just a conversation. I'm not saying that, I have the answers. I'm just asking questions. Because for me, the fact is that I think that's an important role that it should be there in organizations, but how it should be structured should be looked at, only because when I see that over these years, if in the US also numbers, of course, Daniela said that the association is not the only place that you look for numbers. There'll be other people out there, but of course we won't know how many there are. But I'm still looking at it from whether it has become as popular as it should have. Was I think, like I tell people here also that you should be looking at such a thing, but here mediation itself is not something they're using. They don't, I mean, of course you're going to say it's different. it's different, but I'm just saying a third party available within the organization or outside is not something that people are looking for in terms of resolving disputes. That whole mindset, which I call the colonial mindset, that dispute resolution happens in courts and lawyers do it, that by itself is something which people are so stuck in. So, but only thing, and Stacey, you did not get much to say. Stacey, you of course coordinated everything, you brought in everyone, but we did not hear your views on it. So do you want to kind of summarize if you want to? I mean, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think
Jared
it's really important.
I think Jared wants to leave. Jared, you want to wait for the summarizing, or you want to leave?
Oh, I'm heading out, but I did want to say thank you so much for opening up the space and allowing us to speak and share. I very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming in, and you'll be called in for further discussions on this. We'll have a separate maybe session, a longer session. I don't know how much longer it can be.
I'd enjoy that. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Yes, Stacy.
Yeah, I agree with Jared. I really appreciate the space that you've provided and a chance to tell people more about the ombuds profession, especially organizational ombuds. And it is something that there is value, and the people who are working in it every day do hear back from people. And so to your point, I think we all are question askers and we're curious. And so I think this kind of format to look into those things is really important. So thanks, Vikram.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And Daniela has something.
Nope, I have to go as well. Thank you
Perfect.
so much. Thank you
All right.
to all
Thank
of
you
you.
very much. And please circulate the information. If the link to this YouTube thing is lying on the schedule. It's on YouTube. I mean, you can share it with people. Let people, that discussion should happen. I want people to at least have a certain idea of what we're talking about, because people don't. You people are part of the world, so you know, but a lot of people don't. So let's just circulate it out. Then we'll get more feedback and we'll continue the conversation. So thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Stacy, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.